Well, the Winchester Mystery House is a very special place. It was built with no master plan, but there are a lot of architectural oddities that remain a mystery as to why they're here.
There is a house in San Jose, California that has confused, unsettled, and quietly terrified people for over a century. It spans 5 acres. It holds approximately 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, and 10,000 windows. There are 47 fireplaces and staircases that climb directly into solid ceilings. There are doors that open onto blank walls and windows built into floors. Hallways twist and curl in patterns so disorienting that even staff who work there daily have been known to lose their bearings. For over 100 years, this place, the Winchester Mystery House, has been sold to the public as the product of a broken woman's broken mind. A rich widow who lost everything she loved, consulted a spirit medium, and then spent nearly 4 decades building an ever-growing labyrinth to appease the ghosts of everyone killed by her family's famous rifles. It's a great story. The problem is, almost none of it is true. And what investigators actually found when they tore into the walls, literally using ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and acoustic analysis, is something far stranger, far darker, and far more human than any ghost story could ever be. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at this house and the woman who built it completely differently. The woman behind the walls. Before we talk about what was found, you need to understand who Sarah Winchester actually was. Not the caricature, not the tragic widow, the real woman. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut, into a wealthy and socially prominent family. She was educated, seriously educated, at a time when education for women was considered at best a curiosity and at worst a threat to social order. She became fluent in multiple languages. She studied mathematics, physics, and architecture. She was, by every account of people who knew her, brilliant, creative, and intensely private. In 1862, she married William Wirt Winchester, son of Oliver Winchester, the man whose company manufactured the Winchester repeating rifle. You've heard of it? The gun that won the West. A weapon so devastatingly effective that it reshaped the American frontier, accelerated westward expansion, and played a direct role in the violent displacement of Native American peoples across the continent. Sarah married into one of the most consequential and most blood-soaked fortunes in American history. Then tragedy arrived, and it didn't come once. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter named Annie Pardee Winchester. The child lived exactly 40 days. 40 days. She died of marasmus, a severe wasting disease caused by malnutrition, and Sarah reportedly never recovered from that loss. Not really, not fully. In 1881, her husband William followed, dead of tuberculosis at 43, and Sarah was left alone with a grief so heavy it filled rooms and a fortune so vast it could fill mansions. She inherited approximately $20 million, equivalent to over $500 million today. She also received nearly 50% ownership of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, which paid her roughly $1,000 per day for the rest of her life. Every single day. Now here's the question history has always asked about Sarah Winchester. What does a grieving, enormously wealthy woman do with all that money and all that pain? The answer history gave you is she lost her mind and built a haunted house. The answer that investigators found in those sealed rooms is something else entirely. The story that was never true. Let's spend a moment dismantling the myth, because it matters. The conventional narrative, the one that's been printed in tourist brochures and retold in documentaries and horror anthologies for decades, goes like this. After the death of her husband, Sarah Winchester consulted a medium in Boston. That medium told her she was cursed. The spirits of everyone killed by Winchester rifles were hunting her. The only way to survive was to move west, buy land, and build. Build continuously. Never stop. Keep the spirits confused with an ever-growing maze of rooms and passages and staircases to nowhere. Sarah supposedly obeyed. She moved to California, bought a modest farmhouse, and then spent 38 years and millions of dollars expanding it into the sprawling, disorienting 160-room structure that stands today. Construction never stopped, day or night, until the moment she died in 1922. That story has been repeated so many times that it has calcified into accepted fact. Historians who have actually examined the primary sources have found no evidence that Sarah Winchester ever consulted such a medium. None. No contemporary accounts mention this story during her lifetime. No letters, no diary entries, no newspaper reports. The medium narrative, as investigators discovered, appears to have been invented by later owners of the property who needed a sensational hook to sell tickets to tourists. Think about that for a moment. The story you've heard your entire life about the Winchester Mystery House, the foundational explanation for everything strange about the building, was probably made up by real estate promoters. And the woman at the center of that story? She was not building randomly. She was not responding to voices in her head. She was building according to a master plan, a deliberate, sophisticated, meticulously engineered plan. And when investigators opened the walls, they found the proof. The investigation that changed everything. The modern examination of the Winchester Mystery House began, as many great discoveries do, with something mundane. Structural engineers conducting routine safety assessments began noticing anomalies in the building's floor plans. The numbers weren't adding up. There were voids where there shouldn't be voids. Spaces unaccounted for. Modern ground-penetrating radar confirmed what the blueprint suggested. There were cavities behind walls that didn't appear on any existing documentation. Thermal imaging revealed temperature differentials, the telltale signature of sealed spaces that had been hidden from the outside world for over a century. Initial assumptions were practical. Old buildings accumulate construction errors. Spaces get walled off during renovations. This kind of thing happens. But as the investigation deepened over 18 months, a different picture emerged. These weren't construction accidents. These hidden spaces were too numerous, too deliberately concealed, and too carefully constructed to be anything but intentional. Research teams began carefully opening access points to sealed rooms throughout the mansion. And what they found inside those rooms shattered every assumption anyone had ever made about Sarah Winchester. There were 5 major discoveries, each one more disturbing, in the best possible sense, than the last. Discovery 1. The drawings behind the ballroom. The first sealed chamber was found behind the 3rd floor ballroom. It had been walled off sometime before Sarah's death. No signs of having been accessed since. The investigators who entered it found the walls covered, literally covered, in architectural drawings. These were not the doodles of a troubled mind. They were precise, detailed technical plans revealing that Sarah Winchester was designing something far more complex than a simple residence. The drawings showed elaborate systems of hidden passages threading through the house like veins, secret rooms positioned at specific structural junctions, concealed compartments sized and configured for specific purposes. This was not chaos, this was engineering. Some of the spaces documented in those drawings were designed as safe rooms, reinforced chambers that could be sealed from the inside and provisioned for extended occupation. Others were communication, passages allowing movement through the house without passing through the main hallways where a person might be seen. But here is where the investigation took its first truly unsettling turn. Many of the drawings were labeled with symbols that no one on the research team could initially identify. Not standard architectural notation, not any known professional shorthand, something else entirely. Further research revealed these symbols corresponded to a personal cipher system that Sarah had developed herself, a private coded language that allowed her to label rooms and passages according to their intended function without revealing that function to the construction workers who built them or the visitors who walked through them. Ask yourself this: why would an architect develop a secret cipher to label rooms in her own house? The answer waiting in the other sealed rooms was about to make that very clear. Discovery 2. The hidden documents. The second discovery came from a sealed basement chamber hidden behind a false wall. Inside, filing cabinets, decades of correspondence, financial records, and personal journals that Sarah had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal, not just from outsiders, but from her own household staff. The documents revealed a Sarah Winchester almost unrecognizable from the woman of popular legend. The correspondence showed her engaged in sophisticated business dealings, managing her Winchester company shares with sharp financial judgment, and maintaining a network of contacts that stretched from industrialists to politicians to social reformers. This was not a woman who had retreated from the world into madness. This was a woman who was very much engaged with the world, carefully, strategically, and deliberately. But it was the threats that stopped the investigators cold. Multiple letters, some anonymous, some signed, warned Sarah that she would face consequences for the Winchester family's role in manufacturing weapons used in warfare and the violent conquest of the frontier. Some of these letters explicitly threatened her life. Others threatened to expose secrets about Winchester Company practices that Sarah wanted kept hidden. Here is a woman receiving death threats, receiving letters from people who blamed her for profiting from mass death, from people who had lost family members to Winchester rifles, from people who saw her as a symbol of everything corrupt and violent about American expansion. And what does she do? She doesn't retreat to a hotel with private security. She doesn't leave the country. She builds a fortress so cleverly disguised as an eccentric mansion that no one, not her enemies, not investigators, not tourists, ever recognized it for what it was. The stairs that go nowhere? Security features, designed to disorient intruders moving through the house in the dark. The doors that open onto blank walls? Concealed escape routes, accessible only to someone who knew exactly where to press, where to pull, where to look. The twisting hallways that leave visitors dizzy and turned around. Defensive architecture, designed to slow down anyone moving through the house with hostile intent, buying Sarah precious seconds to reach safety. The Winchester Mystery House was not a monument to grief. It was a fortress, built by a woman who had very real, very documented, very legitimate reasons to be afraid. But the third discovery, the most disturbing of them all, was still waiting to be found. Discovery 3. The secret room behind the bedroom. There is a room accessible only through a hidden panel in Sarah Winchester's personal bedroom. It had been sealed so thoroughly that previous investigators conducting examinations of the house for decades had never detected it. It took thermal imaging and acoustic analysis to locate the cavity and careful, painstaking work to access it without destroying the evidence inside. What they found in that room changed the entire investigation. Medical equipment, late 19th and early 20th century surgical instruments, pharmaceutical supplies, and detailed records of treatments administered to individuals whose names had been carefully, systematically removed from every document. Every single name. Gone, with deliberate precision. Historians who examined these records reached a conclusion that is, once you hear it, impossible to dismiss. Sarah Winchester was operating a clandestine medical facility inside her home. The patients appear to have been women. The treatments documented were consistent with obstetric and gynecological care, the kind of care that was, in Sarah Winchester's era, either deeply controversial or outright illegal. The most plausible interpretation, supported by the physical evidence, is that Sarah was providing reproductive health care to women who had no other options. Women dealing with pregnancy, complications, women who needed to give birth in secret, women who required procedures that the law and society had decided they weren't allowed to have. Sit with that for a moment. A widow in late 19th century California, sitting on a fortune built from weapons, quietly providing illegal medical care to vulnerable women inside a hidden room in a house the entire world thought was built by a lunatic. She wasn't hiding from ghosts. She was hiding the women she was trying to protect. And if investigators had found nothing else, just that room, just those records, the story would already be extraordinary. But there was more. Discovery 4. The seance room was never a seance room. The so-called seance room has been one of the most famous features of the Winchester Mystery House for over a century. A blue-walled chamber where, according to legend, Sarah communicated with spirits every single night. It has been presented to tourists for decades as the beating heart of the haunted house mythology, the place where a grieving woman talked to the dead. It had 3 entrances, a cabinet with 13 hooks, unusual proportions, strange acoustics, supernatural obsession, the tour guides would say, evidence of madness. The investigation revealed something else entirely. Hidden within the walls of that room were speaking tubes, a network of communication conduits connecting to rooms throughout the entire mansion. From the seance room, Sarah could monitor activity in distant parts of the house without ever leaving her position. She could hear what was happening on the other side of the building. She could know if someone was where they shouldn't be. The room's 3 entrances weren't spiritual symbolism, they were escape routes, positioned so that no matter which direction a threat approached from, Sarah always had a way out. The cabinet with 13 hooks, supposedly for hanging ceremonial robes used in spirit rituals, concealed a communication panel connecting directly to the servants' quarters. Through that panel, Sarah could summon help or issue instructions without making a sound that might carry through the house's walls. And the nightly sessions, the hours Sarah would spend alone in the seance room while servants waited outside, believing their mistress was communing with the spirit world? She was running her security system. She was checking her monitoring network, reviewing the day's movements, confirming the house was secure, making sure that whatever was hidden within those walls remained hidden. She let the servants believe she was talking to ghosts because a mistress who talks to ghosts is eccentric, peculiar, strange. And strange people get dismissed. Strange people don't get investigated. The supernatural legend was a cover story, and it worked. For over 100 years, it worked perfectly. Discovery 5. The Philanthropist. No one knew. There is a version of Sarah Winchester's story in which the guilt over the Winchester family's legacy consumed her, and in that guilt, she simply fell apart. That version is wrong. The financial records found in the sealed basement chamber told a different story. Among the documents was evidence of a parallel life Sarah had been living in secret. A life of substantial, sustained, anonymous generosity toward the very people her family's business had helped destroy. She provided funding for organizations assisting Native American communities, the communities most devastated by the westward expansion that Winchester Rifles had helped make possible. She supported early civil rights organizations. She funded women's suffrage groups. She directed money toward medical research and hospitals serving impoverished communities who could never have afforded care otherwise. Every dollar given anonymously. Every donation routed through intermediaries. Her name attached to none of it. Why the secrecy? Because public association with these causes, in the political and social climate of her era, could have invited retaliation, damaged her business interests, and made her an even more prominent target for those who already wanted her dead. She was a woman caught in an impossible position. The Winchester fortune was built on weapons. She could not undo that. She could not give the money back to the dead, but she could use what she had to quietly, persistently, systematically try to repair some of what that fortune had broken. And she did, for decades, in total secrecy. The house itself became an instrument of that dual purpose, generating income through the curiosity it attracted, income that Sarah could then quietly redirect toward the communities and causes she could never publicly claim to support. What the hidden rooms suggest about who lived in them, step back and look at everything together. You have a house engineered for concealment, hidden passages, safe rooms, communication networks, escape routes disguised as architectural oddities. You have evidence of a secret medical facility providing reproductive care to women. You have financial records of anonymous support for marginalized communities, and then investigators found something else. Something that, when added to everything else, makes the full picture staggeringly clear. Several of the sealed rooms showed evidence of extended occupation: beds, personal effects, living supplies. The signs of people who had not simply visited but stayed for weeks, possibly months, in spaces hidden from the rest of the world. The conclusion that historians reached is this: Sarah Winchester may have been operating something comparable to an underground railroad, but for women in crisis. Women who needed to disappear. Women dealing with pregnancies they couldn't make public. Women in danger. Women with nowhere else to go. They could be brought into the house, sheltered within its labyrinthine structure, cared for medically, protected by its security systems, and then quietly returned to their lives once their situations had been resolved. The hidden passages allowed these women to move through the house without being observed by regular household staff who weren't part of the arrangement. The speaking tubes would alert Sarah if anyone came snooping. The ghost story kept curious visitors from exploring too thoroughly. And the bizarre architecture, the stairs to nowhere, the doors to walls, meant that even if someone did get inside, they'd be lost before they found anything worth finding. The house that looked from the outside like a monument to madness was actually a sanctuary. One of the most sophisticated and elaborate sanctuaries ever constructed for the protection of vulnerable women. The final discovery, and the most heartbreaking one, there was one more room, small, sealed, located close to Sarah's bedroom. Inside, children's items, clothing sized for infants, toys, books written for young readers. Some of these items appeared to be the possessions of Annie, Sarah's daughter, dead after 40 days, never forgotten. But others were too numerous, too varied, too many small garments in too many different sizes to have belonged to a single child who never lived beyond her first month. Sarah had been collecting these things for years, possibly decades. If you combine that with the medical records, the obstetric care, the secrecy, the evidence of extended stays, the implication is both obvious and devastating. The woman who lost her own daughter after 40 days may have spent the next 4 decades helping other women's children enter the world safely, providing resources for children born into circumstances that required secrecy, making sure that the women who came to her didn't leave without what they needed for whatever came next. A woman who could not save her own child, who then spent her life and her fortune and her freedom trying to save as many other children and their mothers as she possibly could. Behind the ghost story, behind the mad widow narrative, behind the stairs to nowhere and the doors to walls, that is who Sarah Winchester was. What history did to her. Sarah Winchester died on September 5th, 1922. She was 83 years old. Construction on the house stopped the moment she was gone, as if the building itself exhaled. The property was sold, and the people who bought it looked at this vast, strange structure, full of passages and hidden rooms and security systems they didn't understand, and they made a decision. They decided the simplest story was the best story. A crazy widow haunted by ghosts, a fortune wasted on staircases to nowhere. Come see the house a lunatic built. For more than 100 years, visitors have walked those hallways and laughed at the architectural absurdities, confident in their understanding of what they were looking at. ESI, rich woman went mad and built nonsense until she died. The investigation revealed how profoundly, completely, almost willfully wrong that understanding was. Sarah Winchester was not mad. She was one of the most methodical, sophisticated, and morally complex women of her era. She was a woman living under genuine physical threat who engineered her own security. A woman who saw suffering she was uniquely positioned to address and built secret infrastructure to address it. A woman who used the cover of eccentricity to do things that society and the law would have destroyed her for if they'd known. She cultivated the ghost story. She let people call her crazy. She let them laugh, because as long as they were laughing at the mad widow, they weren't looking closely enough to find what she was actually doing. What we still don't know. The investigation continues. Many of the sealed rooms contained evidence that documents had been deliberately destroyed, burned, or removed by Sarah or by trusted parties before her death. Whatever records existed of the women she helped, the procedures she performed, the children she protected, most of it is gone. She made sure of that. What we do know is significant. What we don't know is haunting. How many women passed through those hidden rooms? How many came to Sarah Winchester with no other options and left with their lives intact? How many children were born in that house and sent into the world without any official record of their arrival? We may never fully know, and perhaps that's appropriate. Sarah was protecting identities then. In some sense, the house is still protecting them now, but the broad shape of the truth is no longer in question. The Winchester Mystery House is not a monument to madness. It is a monument to a woman who used her wealth, her intelligence, her architectural genius, and even her reputation, the story of her own supposed insanity, as tools in service of people who had nothing and no one else. She spent 38 years building a house the world called crazy. She built it to protect secrets that could have sent her to prison. She built it to shelter women the world had thrown away. She built it to say, quietly and stubbornly and in a language only she could read, that there are things worth protecting more than reputation, more than safety, more than what people think of you. The truth is stranger than the ghost story. The Winchester Mystery House has drawn millions of visitors who came to marvel at the architectural peculiarities of a deranged woman's obsession. They saw staircases to nowhere. They didn't see a woman building escape routes for herself and for others. They saw doors to blank walls. They didn't see the passages hidden behind them. They saw a seance room and imagined a grief-mad widow talking to the dead. They didn't see the communication network of a woman who was at all times listening for danger. That is perhaps the most disturbing thing the investigation uncovered. Not a hidden room or a medical record or a coded cipher, but the fact that the truth was always there, hidden in plain sight, disguised as madness, waiting for someone to look closely enough. Sarah Winchester looked the world in the eye and let it call her crazy. She let that story spread. She built it into the architecture of the house itself, crafting something so bewildering that people would never stop to ask the real question. Not, why would a mad woman build a house like this, but what would a brilliant, threatened, deeply moral woman need a house like this to do? The secret rooms have given us the answer. And the Winchester Mystery House, the one you thought you knew, will never look the same again. The investigations are ongoing. More sealed rooms may yet be discovered. More evidence may yet emerge. But the story of Sarah Winchester has already been irrevocably rewritten, not by myth or legend, but by what was waiting in the dark behind the walls she built to protect it.